Hello and welcome to another episode of the Investor Financing Podcast. I'm your host, Beau, and today we are not going to talk about real estate. We're not going to talk about short-term rentals. We're not going to talk about flipping houses. We're not going to talk about buying multifamily. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship. We're going to talk about sales. We're going to talk about telling your story through podcasting, which is exciting to me because, people out here that are going to see this in the future or listen to it, I'm telling a story. I'm interviewing great people, and this is what we're going to dive into. We've got Collin Mitchell. He's a four-time founder, 4X founder. He's passionate about sales, entrepreneurship, and podcasting. Collin is the co-founder of Salescast and the host of Sales Transformation. Collin lives in LA with his beautiful wife, 4 kids, and a new puppy. And let me guess, it is a Labradoodle.
It is. How did you guess?
Yes. Was I right?
You were right. You hit it on the money. Is that just a guess, or did you do some stalking research there?
No, honestly, that it's not a guess, and I didn't research. The only thing I stalked you on, I watched somebody interviewing you on YouTube.
Yeah.
But I have a sixth sense, and I don't know what it is, but I can see things about people, and I guess your dog.
That's creeped out, man. I gotta go now.
That's pretty awesome. I was listening to a podcast about your journey, and you grew up really poor, and you were able to finally. I didn't get to the rest of the story, but I was listening to hey, you literally grew up on food stamps and single parent, and you're the story that had success from that, and you got into sales and started companies, and now you're with started Salescast. And we were talking before we went live about just the power of what podcasting is doing to the world. And podcasting, you said podcasting right now is like YouTube 10 years ago. It's like the sky's the limit, and I totally believe in this. I mean, putting yourself out there, you're going to meet more people. You're going to get to interview people. I love interviewing people because I learn something. Every interview I'm learning. You can do it yourself. And then when I'm asking good questions, people love these episodes too, because we're going to dive deep into people's background. And it's nice to put a spin on my show today and not talk about real estate. And we'll talk about entrepreneurship, which is perfect in real estate. But welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. I can't believe you guessed that, but where shall we dive in? Where do you want to start?
Well, let's just dive in on let's just start with Salescast, and just a little overview of what Salescast does, and then for anybody listening that's thinking about starting a podcast, why they should podcast.
Yeah. So Salescast is a revenue first podcast agency. We work mostly with B2B brands, helping them drive revenue through podcasting. There's a lot of different ways that can happen. From a high level, we're typically aligning the podcast strategy with a business objective that can drive revenue and connect them with more buyers. Or sometimes it could be placing people on shows that their buyers are listening to and putting them on what we like to call a podcast tour. So we'll book them on high quality shows. We also have a free podcast community that's growing every day with over, 450 podcasters. That kind of evolved over time of me and my co-founder, Chris, meeting with over 1,500 podcasters last year. Either people that had already started somewhere in their podcast journey or, were just thinking about getting started. Only a handful of those were really qualified to work with us or the right fit. And we couldn't really do much than let them, pick our brain for 20 minutes and kind of send them on their way. And so creating the podcast community was sort of our way of giving back to the podcast community as a whole, because 50% of people that start a podcast fail. And many of those people never even make it to episode 8 or 10. And usually it's because lack of knowledge, lack of expertise, lack of relationships, or the big one is just lack of strategy. A lot of people think of podcasting as only a marketing activity. And those are typically the people that give up because they don't see an ROI soon enough. And they feel that their time is better spent doing something else. Because the podcast journey typically looks kind of something like where it kind of skyrockets at first because you're really excited and you're telling everybody about it and you're loving it and you're putting in long hours and editing and putting all this work and effort into it. And then it tends to go kind of flat. And this is very common for almost all podcasters. And that flat period could stay a month, 2 months, 6 months, really depends. But people only are operating based on what they know to get them to the point where they've gotten, and they don't know how to get any further, and they get stuck, and then they give up, and they give up before they outlast other people, and the shows really start to take off.
That's awesome. Now, like, how would somebody, not me, but somebody, like, if you have a podcast, what's the like appropriate way to start looking for sponsors? Do you deal in that? Does your company work in that realm too?
Yeah, we do. So, we have about 75 shows in our network now, and that's a cumulative about 1 million monthly downloads. So we are starting to work with brands where they want to sponsor shows within our network. And the benefit there is we can leverage our network as a whole in comparison to where some shows kind of feel that they have to get to 5 or 10,000 downloads a month before they can start getting sponsors. There's lots of options. Running ads on your show is just one revenue stream. Personally, my show has 3 revenue streams, and there's potentially like 10 different ways you could monetize your show, depending on what it is. I mean, the easiest thing that you can do is promote your own stuff, right? Maybe you have a book, maybe you have a course, maybe you have some digital products, maybe you have a coaching or consulting business, maybe you have some sort of value that you can offer people to get them onto your email list and start to identify people who are prospects. Like, those are all ways that you could monetize your show early on, through just promoting your own stuff. Right. And then my personal favorite is really just using the show as part of a sales motion. Like, who are the people that can drive revenue in your business? What are the relationships that are most valuable to you right now in your business, within your industry, what you do? Maybe that's referral partners. Maybe that's investors for your startup. Maybe that's like whatever relationships you need more of. The podcast is a great way to build more of those relationships, because you're inviting somebody on your platform. You're asking them to talk about themselves. You're lifting them up. And you're giving them a good experience. And naturally, they're going to generally be curious about you and what it is that you do at some point, maybe after the podcast when you guys are talking, or maybe, through some future potential collaborations. So the podcast is, having a podcast is a great way to build relationships that can drive revenue for you and your role, your business. That's another way to monetize. That's a whole, another revenue stream. Then there's, ads. You could also charge people to come on your show. That's one of my revenue streams, is people pay to come on for a 30-minute interview. And so there's lots of options and things that you could do rather than the traditional path of like, I need to get sponsors. There's also paid podcasts or community or, Patreon. I mean, there's lots and lots of options. A lot of people even just get started with affiliate marketing. Find things that you use that you're super passionate about that will resonate with your audience, and you can start to promote those products or services on your podcast with maybe an affiliate link or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I mean, almost every business person out here, real estate agents, mortgage brokers, business owners, right? They all have a story to tell. And like, it's just amazing to me. I think we were talking before how people find me on YouTube and listen to my podcast, and it's like they book a call. To me, that's amazing. And like, I think this is just like actually podcasting and my YouTube channel are my number one lead generation source, period. Like, that's pretty amazing to me. And, I think when you were talking about the sale, like the podcast experience, like you get all amped up and then you flatline. And I really think it takes at least 100 shows to really get momentum. Is that kind of what you see too, or where would you say the momentum part? Most of these podcasts are going to be really kind of starting to grow.
It's hard to put a specific number on it because it is different for everybody, and there's a lot of factors, right? Like, do they have also a social following that they're leveraging? Do they have an email list that they can leverage to grow the podcast? Are they being strategic about the types of guests that they have on, which is a strategy that can help with growth significantly, right? If you think about who are my ideal clients, well, who do they look up to? Whose books do they read? Who do they follow? who has a large social following of the types of people that I want to listen to my show that could also potentially be clients for me, and asking those people to come on your show and give them an awesome shareable piece of content that's lifting them up, where they're saying something awesome that they're going to be proud to share with their network. Maybe even they give you a mention on a blog or a newsletter, and then their followers become yours. So it really depends, right? And we've seen shows that come with us for 2 months and they're already getting over 10,000 downloads. We've seen a show that we recently launched where it's a 5-day-a-week show. The episodes are under 10 minutes, and the show's just about cold calling. It's called the Cold Calling Podcast. There has literally been zero marketing on that show, and it's grown to like almost 2,000 downloads a month in 60 days, just organically on the platforms, because it's ranking in keywords and owning a space that there was a lack of inventory. So there's just so many factors to put a specific number on it.
Yeah, I'm super excited. This is like the stuff I love talking about, because I always look at it like every episode that's done, whether I'm a guest or it's my show. Yeah. It's like there's a little seed being planted, and like that seed's going to grow and grow and grow. And somebody 6 months or a year or 2 years later is going to find this video or find this podcast, and they might reach out. And then I've got to meet so many people. So it's just like I do believe, and I think this is. I don't even watch TV anymore. I'm either watching something on YouTube or listening to a podcast. That's just me. Now I don't watch barely any Netflix, which is crazy. So I know this is where everything's going, because in YouTube YouTube is the second largest search engine, right? Google owns YouTube. Now, is there a way to index podcasts where people can find them in search as well? Like kind of like when you go in the search bars, like for YouTube, and I search, this kind of loan, and my video popped up. How can people do that kind of same thing with the audio?
Yeah. So, Google is already prioritizing. I can't speak today. Podcasts in search results. So if you search topics or that are a podcast part of a podcast title, you're going to see it in the top of the results. If you search you search a specific search that is not necessarily just the name of the podcast, but it could also be part of the description of the podcast. It could be part of the episode title of the podcast. That's going to show up in the search results up pretty high. Okay. So Google's already over indexing that stuff. That's happening. The other thing is like podcast SEO is a thing too, right? Similar to on YouTube, but it's actually a little bit simpler than YouTube, and it's a lot less competitive. So there's a lot of different places that are considered, real estate for your podcast to be found on the podcast platforms. Your name is so important of your show. So many people want to come up with a clever name that sounds cool, that's a play on words, that has marketing buzz, and like all of those names suck for visibility. Okay, because nobody's searching your fancy name that you came up with that you crowdsourced with some friends. People are searching specific topics or specific things that they want to learn about. And so whatever that is, if it's real estate, if it's sales, if it's marketing, that needs to be part of your podcast name, because it holds the highest weight in visibility and growing organically on the podcast platforms. And then from there, a very common overlooked place of real estate is the show description. The show description, a lot of times you'll see, this is the, whatever podcast with Joe Schmo. And like, that's it. That's the podcast description. It's a huge missed opportunity. You can pack as many keywords as you want into that, description for the things that people are going to search. And then there's also tags that you can set on your podcast host as well. Be very specific with your podcast categories. That's also really important. Okay. And then we've got basically 2 more spots. So you've got your episode titles, right? Please don't put like episode number 50 with, guest name. Like some people just make it that simple, and they don't realize how important the episode title really is. It's another opportunity to use hooks and keywords to draw people in, 1, to be found, 2, to draw people in to listen. And then last but not least is your show notes. Show notes are so important. They are a pain to create if you're going to do them right. And it's typically a detail that a lot of people that are managing a podcast on their own tend to let fall through the cracks because they're more, concerned with editing the content or making short clips or doing all these other things. But it is worth putting in the time to make good quality show notes for every single episode, because that's another opportunity to get some keywords in there.
And then there's a whole distribution, right? It's going to
Yep.
automatically go out to people that are subscribed, but are you doing email marketing with your links and things like that? I mean, there's a whole. Are you sharing on your social
Yeah.
channels? Because the whole idea is to get a lot of subscribers, and not only get a lot of subscribers, right? Get subscribers that are actually listening.
Exactly.
Like,
And so a couple things there. Consistency and completion of episodes really matter. Okay. And so you see a lot of interview shows that are extremely long. They think they're going to be the next Joe Rogan. And sorry, there's only one Joe Rogan. There's only one, there's a handful of people that people are going to tune in and listen to for extremely long interviews. And you're probably not one of them. Right. So really the appetite for interviews like 20 to 30 minutes. That's really what we see performing well. But what's interesting is the podcast platforms want to see completion of episodes, because that's telling them that people are enjoying your content. Right. And so if you're going to get found in the results, then a nice hack is you can do shorter episodes. So like, let's say you do an interview driven show and maybe you drop those on a Tuesday. On a Thursday, you could do a short solo episode that's like under 10 minutes. And the benefit there is that short show is going to get a really high completion, because even 20 to 30 minute interviews are only getting like a 65 to 70% completion, where people are only listening to, 2/3 of the episode. With those 10 minutes, they're like 90 plus, and we've seen it even higher. And I was like, we've seen it 90 to 130. We're like, what's 130? Well, people are listening to them and going back and listening to them again. And so that's going to start to give you priority, and it's going to show the platforms that people are enjoying your content. So that's a nice hack. The other thing is that, you're not just automatically on all the podcast platforms, right? When you sign up with your podcast host, it's going to automatically publish you on some. Google and Apple, you have to manually submit. Okay. Then there's more premium platforms like Pandora and iHeartRadio, which you really can't apply till you're like 60 days in and that you've got some, a little bit of history. So you definitely want to get on those platforms. And then, there's like probably a couple dozen podcast platforms that, most people have never even heard of, but get on as many of them as you can. Like, it's absolutely free. It doesn't cost you anything, and it all adds up.
so I use Libsyn.
So Libsyn's the host, right? Which that'll push it out to all the platforms. And it'll automatically get you on like Stitcher and, all these ones. But there's also a bunch that you've probably never heard of that require you to go, log in, submit your RSS feed. So I always say, get on as many as you can, and then wait till you're like 2 months in. Make sure you get approved on Pandora and iHeart, because they do get a lot of listens.
Do you have a list on your website of all these platforms, like in one place or like, yeah, that would be kind of cool to know where just the ones I'm missing.
I don't know that there's one place. I know that like specifically for our shows, we use Simplecast for our hosts, which is an alternative to Libsyn. And it has all of them listed in there. And then you just need to basically update your link once you get it submitted. I think most hosts, have that sort of setup. But I think if you do a Google search, I do remember there's an article, there's something out there that'll give you a little bit of guidance on, what podcast platforms you might be, missing out on.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's huge, right? Like, why wouldn't you want to be everywhere?
Exactly.
Because that could mean somebody's listening and you have that perfect message and they need what you have.
Yeah.
Now, kind of walk me through like an avatar of like, so you can work with a newbie, but they got to be committed. They have to be serious. It's not like, obviously there's cost to this. And so like, what would an avatar candidate be for you? Like, what it typically is the range they might be spending, and like, like how does that all work? Because I heard you say earlier, not everybody's a good fit. That's why you have the free community. But who are you really looking for your business?
Yeah. So basically, for us specifically at Salescast, we, for the most part, work with B2B people in the B2B space, or that have, a sales process that's highly driven by relationships. And that could be your coach, consultant, solopreneur, people like that still are, kind of fit into that. But mainly because, we are not the cheapest option. Like there is a lot of shops that can create content, and that is definitely part of what we do. But there's very few that specialize in helping you drive revenue, aligning your show strategy with business objectives, or helping you create the show as a totally separate business unit to drive revenue. And that's really where we specialize. And that's what our focus is. And then we have the community, which is free for people. And then we also have like a paid upgrade community where people get additional resources to help them grow and also help them to get into our network so they could qualify for sponsorship as well.
So there's multiple. You have a free community, then you have like a smaller fee where you're going to get a lot more tips and tricks. And then, if it's deemed necessary, that they do have this other like kind of elite level where they can dive in and get kind of handheld services essentially. That's gonna really promote their business in the right way, because there's so many ways to go with this. It's not only if you have your show having guests, but getting on the right shows. And I often think about, whose platforms would I be best suited for, right? Like if I'm just talking about investor loans, I talk about entrepreneurship too, but how do I position myself? And, like I created a one pager to send out and that kind of stuff, but that's kind of cheesy, right? I don't know.
It's like every other piece of outreach that, people get. So, I mean, we have a whole masterclass that we do on how to get yourself booked on 3+ podcasts per week. We have the recording and stuff like that. I can actually give you, I'll share a link with you, which you can share for your listeners as well, where they can get access to all of our past webinars, because we cover a lot of this stuff in really deep detail and get pretty tactical.
Yeah.
But just high level, the best way to stand out is to not send a one pager, and keep the messaging short, actually do some research on the show, leverage video, right? Because there's a huge benefit in, like, imagine if we didn't know each other and then a video pops in your inbox and you just see like, okay, I've got a good looking setup, I've got a professional mic. Like that alone is going to stand out in a big way, because people that are doing a show want to know, like, am I going to get some good quality audio if we, do an interview together? That's one of their concerns. And then the biggest way that you can really stand out is like drop a review for the show. Like that's what people care about the most. Right. For you, if I was reaching out to you, I might see, okay, you have more of a YouTube first strategy. I might say like, hey, I liked some of your videos and hit the bell or whatever. Right. That would stand out to you. Right. That rather than everybody else who's maybe trying to get your attention for them to come on your show and do some boring sales pitch. And then make it about the listeners. Right. Because the thing that hosts care about most is, well, if I have you on my show, are you going to be able to provide something valuable to my listeners? Because that's really what I care about most. Like, can we create some good content together that's going to have some substance and some value? Or are you going to come on here and just try to sell everybody your book? Like that's the big thing. So if you can cover those things in your messaging, then you're going to stand out in a big way and you're going to get some pretty good responses. And the big thing is follow up. Like most people who have a YouTube channel or video series or a podcast, like they're busy people. They're typically entrepreneurs, business professionals. They might have a full-time job, and this is something that they do on the night of the weekends. Like, don't expect to just send them one message and then them get back to you. You might have to follow up 3 to 5 times where they're like, oh yeah, sorry, I've been super busy. I'd love to have you on. So we see typically reply rates are in that like 3 to 5 follow-up range.
Yeah. Like anything, people that are trying to buy houses off market, right? You gotta follow up. You gotta be creative and how you're structuring this. And this is the same thing with your podcast. I mean, if you're taking this seriously and you really want to grow, it's like it's a business, really. I mean, it's a business. Period. People might do this for fun, but this is an extreme business. To me, I started looking at like podcasting as like a platform that it's an asset by itself. That's probably going to be the biggest revenue platform out there. That and YouTube, in my mind, because I like YouTube. Or like why wouldn't you do this? And it's virtually I mean, obviously to get started, there's really no costs, right? You have you have like a Lipson or a platform like that, and you can cut your teeth. And then once you get comfortable, you can join your free group and get tips and stuff. And then when you get to a point where you're like, hey, I want to take this serious now, there's ways you can grow, like, and I always just wonder, like, if you can get on somebody's platform and get in front of thousands and thousands of viewers and listeners, that's like the most incredible thing ever. Right?
Yeah.
Like how can I go out there? So if you're very strategic, like if we just took me, for example, I do business loans for people, SBA and real estate loans.
Yeah.
If I could go share some messages on people that are getting 10, 20, 50,000 downloads a month,
Yeah.
you can't beat that kind of marketing. I could be doing pay-per-click and things like that, but that's not going to drive that much. Like, this is like the biggest sales piece I've ever seen in the history.
Well, there's two things that I'll mention, right, that kind of validate exactly what you're saying. Is one, brands understand the value of podcast listeners, right? They're more affluent people. They're typically going to be your decision makers. Okay. And in 2021, there was 1.3 billion spent on podcast advertising. And by 2025, that's going to double and it's going to hit 2.7 billion. Okay. So, and the thing is podcast listeners are 4 times more likely to take action on an offer that's put in front of them than somebody clicking on an ad, reading a blog, or anything like that. So because it's similar to influencer marketing, right? People that are tuning into your show every single week that you're providing value for and education, and there's a lot of trust that's established. Like, they're following you to learn how to do things, how to, to get, and they're getting value from you on a regular basis. If you bring somebody on your show, that's somebody you trust. And if there's something that they can do to help them, it's sort of like it's the equivalent of getting a referral from a friend.
Yeah, that's amazing. It really is. Like, and people, like, they call you and they think they know you. It's like, hey, how you doing? It's like,
yeah,
like, but they've been listening to you for sometimes years.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other powerful way. I mean, this really excites me. I mean, I know this wasn't a typical show, people out there that are listening and watching, but I want you guys to start thinking about these ways that we can grow our platform, our business. Like, literally any business or any person out there, I think, has a message to be told. And what does that mean to you? And how can you, grow your lifestyle around it? And hopefully one day I could just do a show full time and make a living from it. That'd be the best. Like,
that's the dream, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at even like there's a real estate platform called Bigger Pockets, for example.
Yeah, I'm familiar. Yeah.
And I look how many like downloads and views they're getting on YouTube. It's just amazing. They niched out in a particular space in real estate investing, but there's still such opportunity. I mean, there's so many people in like multifamily. Yeah. They raise money from investors. They have their shows. I've interviewed a lot for my show. That's how I know. So it's really like finding your why and what you want to talk about, whether it's sales, it's technology, and then figuring a way how to get your message out there and to bring good guests on your show. Like, then I started thinking, did I pigeonhole myself by having investor financing podcast, because it's really a show, and then also I kind of niche myself into the whole financing, but I also talk about entrepreneurship. So I might have rethought my original title of the show, but it's 400 episodes later, so I guess it's too late. And
it's never too late, but
yeah.
I mean, being too niche is not a bad thing, because, and specifically for like, let's say podcast advertising. Well, the more niche you are, the more premium you can charge. Right? Like, if you're a very general show, you're going to be stuck in this like really low cost per thousand sort of industry standard. And the more niche your show is, you can charge more. And also we've also seen too, like, everybody wants to get on the big shows. Everybody wants to advertise on the big shows. Everybody wants to be guest on the biggest shows out there. But we've actually seen really good conversion on like smaller to medium shows, because those audiences are really loyal following, and people who tune in follow them on social. In a lot of cases, they might know these people. They might have actually got on a call at some point, because even for me with my show, If somebody reaches out to me, sends me a message and says, "Hey, I heard you on this show," or "Hey, I really enjoyed this episode," like I'll hop on a Zoom with them and spend, 15 minutes, 20 minutes with them if I can help them, because those sort of things go a long way with really building up, super promoters and fans that are going to promote you and what you do.
That's awesome. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoy this. I could sit here and ask a million questions more, but I just wanted to guys give you something new and something to open your eyes about the power of your platform and to open your mind, to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid. I still stutter. I say, I do all that kind of stuff, and I try to cut them out sometimes, but I say it so much we can't. You're not going to be perfect. That's okay. People don't care if you're not perfect. We're our biggest critics, so just go out and start a podcast.
You're listening to the Investor Financing Podcast. We'll be right back after this break.
Hello, Beau here, host of the Investor Financing Podcast. Are you a lender, real estate professional, or vendor that provides products or services within the real estate investing and business owner space? We are offering a few sponsorship opportunities to get in front of a highly targeted audience. If you're interested, please click the link below for further information. We look forward to talking with you. Thanks. Make it a great day. Collin, where can they kind of join your initial community just to kind of get their feet wet? Where's the best place to send them?
Yeah, so best place to kind of get into our world and check things out is salescast.community. Go to salescast.community. That'll get access to the free podcast community. I think there's around 450 people in there now. There's new people joining every day. We do weekly events, tons of resources, all kinds of cool things going on.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Just to close this out, what do you do? What's kind of your ritual to kind of keep you motivated? What do you do to kind of keep your edge in business and entrepreneurship?
Listen to a lot of podcasts.
There you go.
There you go.
I do the same thing. Anyways, guys, I hope this motivated you to at least open your mind to podcasting and creating a platform, or potentially just being a guest on platforms, which is another option. So this is off the topic that we normally talk about, but I think this is so relevant in today. Like Gary Vee says, we're all media companies. We're not that other company. We're all media companies, whatever you do. So you should get it now before it's too late. Thanks so much, everybody.